computer. Okay, done. Last week, we ended a 2-week series on the trials of Jesus. And one of the last points we made that Jesus was not sentenced to die against his will. And as we start today celebrating the resurrection and Easter Sunday, we look at the crucifixion and the resurrection, and we pick up from the fact that Jesus was not sentenced to death against his will. Do you want me to share my screen?
Sure.
Share my screen. Share. Okay.
So, Jackie, you're the only one I can see. Can you hear us? Okay, good. So, as usual, my parents always said, why can't you just do anything normal? Why can't you just do it the normal way? And I
say that too.
As she does say that too, as tends to happen, I want to maybe take a different approach on something than what you normally see on Easter. But one of the things that always concerns me about Easter and about what we hear, what we're told about it, and it just concerns me because I listen to people. There's a point not long before this, Luke 12:4, you see on the slide in front of you, where Jesus advises his followers, I tell you, my friends, do not be afraid of those who kill the body and after that can do no more. Now, that's a hard teaching. You know, we're afraid of things like death, you know, strangely. And he tells us, don't be afraid of those who, you know, just kill the body. But then also later on, we see him on the Mount of Olives, and has his disciples, he's left them at the entrance, but he goes in further to pray. And we see him talk to God and say, Father, if you're willing, take this cup from me. He knows what he's facing. We talked about the trial. What is it? You want to say?
No.
We've talked about the trial. We've talked about the fact that he's been moving towards this. And so we see him saying, if there's another way, take this cup from me. This is hard. And people are often left with this idea. In fact, I've heard sermons on this where they say, well, you know, he was human and he's dreading what's coming. But it's hard to ignore the fact that if what he's saying is, I would really prefer not to go through with this. And at the same time, he advises us, don't be afraid of that. It's okay, don't be afraid of those who can kill the body. How do we reconcile those two things? And what Mary has in red down at the bottom of the slide, if things don't seem to be consistent, it's our understanding that's deficient and not the word. So you want to click back so we can see everybody, or you want to wait because there's more to say? No, leave it. That's fine. So you just get to watch the slide instead of us. We've talked for weeks about the fact that leading up to him coming to Jerusalem, on the way down from the Galilee area, he insulted every Pharisee, Sadducee, scribe on the way. And he said things that infuriated them. And we know he was not foolish, so he knows who these people are, and he knows what it means. He's done everything he could to assure that they're going to be angry by the time he gets there. And so when we see this description of him saying, if there's any way, let this cup pass from me, if what he's talking about is, I don't want to go through with this execution, it's inconsistent with everything he's done and said for months. And when you see things like that and they seem so inconsistent, it's usually a sign there's more going on. There's more to it than this. So here's what I want. There are a couple of things I want. Can you share again? Now see what I did. I messed you up.
That's okay. Can you go to the second point?
Yes. And I want to suggest that it does seem inconsistent, but it's not. So there are two verses I want you to look at. The first is John 1, verse 14. In the beginning was the Word. And we've talked about this. The Greek was logos, but it's clear what he's talking about is Jesus. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
And this is verse 1 and verse 14.
Verse 14. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We've seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. Now that's one part. And what I want you to keep in mind from that is what he's saying, what John is telling us. And Jesus says things, and we're going to see that he's been present in God's presence. He has been unified with God from the very beginning, from long before there was any thought of us. He has never been apart from the presence of God from the beginning. And let's go ahead to John 8, verses 52 to 58. And he was always in this conflict with the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and they scream at him, "Now we know that you have a demon," declared the Jews. "Abraham died, and so did the prophets. Yet you say that anyone who keeps your word will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, as did the prophets. Who do you claim to be?" And this is one of those, well, we'll get to it. But he says, if I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. The one who glorifies me is my Father, of whom you say he's our God. And this is a bold statement. You do not know him, but I know him. If I said I do not know him, I would be a liar like you. And so you imagine, why are these people mad at him when he gets to Jerusalem? If I said I don't know him, I'd be a liar like you. But I do know him, and I keep his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad. And that's the part. Here's where they pounce. Then the Jews said to him, "You're not yet 50 years old, and you have seen Abraham?" And this is the statement. Truly, truly, I tell you, before Abraham was born, I am. And, you know, if he had said I was alive, I was there before Abraham, which is part of the meaning, which is in this context is the meaning. I was there. I was with God. I was present before Abraham was born. But he uses this expression, I am. And that's the same expression exactly when Moses says he's going in and he says, "Well, who do I tell him you are?" And he says, "You tell him I am." And there's a thing that's not used in Hebrew, this idea of saying I am, except when you're referring to, when they're talking about God referring to himself. It's a thing they sort of reserve. He's made a very bold statement. But the part I want to look at is his declaration that he was there, he was around before Abraham was even born. This is a long time before this. And he says, I was there. And the point that I want you to get from this is that he's never been away. He's never been outside of the communion of God the Father. And so when he says, "Let this cup pass from me," he's not saying this execution that he has absolutely made happen. He has done everything he possibly could to make sure that they're angry enough for this to happen. Last week, when we closed about the trials, one of the last things I said is you have to keep in mind, they didn't take him against his will. He went headlong into that execution. He didn't go to the garden. He didn't advise people, don't be afraid of the ones who can only kill your body, and then turn around and say, "Oh, I'm so afraid of this." This is a time where he is going to, we're taught that this is an atonement. This is a time where he takes this place for our sin, he has to be apart from the presence of God for the first time in history ever. This is a frightening thing. And it's one of the things that I look at us and I look at me, and sometimes I look at you, but this idea of being apart from God, of not being in accord with God, not being in the presence, to look at that as a tragedy is something that we have to stretch to think about it in those terms. But when you're talking about, he says he's been around from the beginning and he's been in the presence of God. And this separation is unimaginable for us. And that's what he's talking about in the garden. And the reason that it's so important, the reason I want to bring this up on Easter is because we're supposed to get this assurance and this comfort at this time, especially when we think about Easter, when we think about the fact, this atonement for us. But a lot of people I have seen over the years have been left with this idea that he tells us don't be afraid of death. But then when it's him, oh, look, and then what they say often is, well, he was human. That's why he did. That's why he was afraid of the crucifixion. That's why he was asking. He's not asking. And it's one of the most important things, I think, for us to understand, because what does that say to us when we face a time, a trial, a test, a scary time, and we're told, oh, trust God. And you look at that and you say, well, look, he didn't do it. When it was his time, he didn't do that, but he did. I promise you he did. Yeah, go ahead and go to 3.
See if I can get to 3.
It's hard to get to. You got a little bitty space up there. If not, I'm just going to read it, but let's see if you can get it. You got to pull it down to get that off there, I think. There, There. I want to read you some of his words from John, from the Gospel of John. This is chapter 10, and there are 2 verses, 17 and 18. And as always, he's having a fallout with the Pharisees. And he says these words: "The reason my Father loves me is that I laid down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me." Look at those words. Those are his words. This is not somebody else even writing that. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father. You can't ignore that when it comes to the trials, the crucifixion, and the resurrection. And I tried to close really hard with that last week. But keep that in mind. They did not come and take him against his will.
What?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, we'll go ahead and I'll talk and then I'll get to that one. But they didn't take him against his will. You look at his words and he says, I lay my life down willingly. No one takes it from me. When he's in the garden, when he's in the Mount, on the Mount of Olives, in that Garden of Gethsemane, he knows he's laying his life down. This is a sacrifice. There's a reason why it happens at the time of Passover, because it parallels the sacrifice of the spotless lamb. I lay my life down willingly. No one takes it from me. So when it comes to Easter, we should think about it more often, but when it comes to Easter and we're on this subject, and someone told me this last week, they were watching The Passion of the Christ. And I'm not bashing the movie, but they go to great lengths to talk about this tremendous suffering that he went through because of the crucifixion, as if that was the issue. This And they took him, they came, they grabbed him, they put it, they did all these things. They took him against his will and did these terrible things to him. They did not take him against his will. And you see it in his own words. No one takes it from me. It's mine to lay down. Put that in context then of these things we study at Easter, and keep in mind, he absolutely embraced this. The idea of being separated from the presence of God should terrify us. We talk often about, we say, what is sin? Because people like to get down and make a lot of rules. Is that a sin? Is that not a sin? The Jews love to do it. Sin
So do
is,
we.
I
said, so do we.
So do we, yeah. We say often, sin is that which separates you from God. And that makes it really easy. That gives us such a broad covering that we can't avoid a lot of things. We can't say, well, I'm better than that person. At least I don't do that. And I'm speaking from personal experience. At least I don't do, I'm on the scale. I weigh out pretty good. I mean, that which separates us from God is what the nature of sin is. And what you see he's about to do is be separated for the very first time in creation from God, and it terrified. I mean, it is a horrible thought looking forward to it, and yet it's necessary. And at the end, he says, "Nevertheless, not my will, but yours." So you want to?
No, do you want to do Mark?
Yeah, Mark. So we're going to skip there. One more thing we want to mention in this. This is Mark 15. These are verses 42 to 45. Now it was already evening, since it was preparation day. That is the day before the Sabbath. Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent council member, that's Sanhedrin, a prominent council member who himself was waiting for the kingdom of God, boldly went to Pilate to ask for the body of Jesus. Pilate was surprised to hear that Jesus was already dead. So he summoned the centurion to ask if this was so. When Pilate had confirmed it with the centurion, he granted the body to Joseph. And we wanted to, I think, put that in because we talked about it this week. It's one of those things that is there and we tend to skip over. But Pilate is surprised to hear that he's already dead. Crucifixion normally lasts, it can last for days. It's designed to be a deterrent to other people not to cross the Roman Empire. And so they put them out there prominently, and it lasts for days. We're told, though, that because it was the beginning of a major Sabbath, a major Shabbat, it's Passover, they didn't want those people hanging out there. So they said, let us break the legs. This is a terrible thing. They can no longer raise up to keep their lungs functioning. They have to raise up to take a breath, and it hastens the end. And Pilate gave his permission for that. But even with that, Pilate was surprised to hear that he's already dead.
And they didn't have to break his legs.
And they didn't have to break his leg, which incidentally is a prophecy that none of his bones would be broken. But what we get from that, these things are not coincidental. There's a point there where he says, "It is finished." And then he says, "Father, into your hand." He died. He laid his life down so that he could take it back up. He died when the time came. It was not from what they did to him. This is a sacrifice. And to miss that, to not get that at Easter when we make a point of studying it, to take the position that these Romans and these Jewish leaders were so powerful that they came and got him, and they were able to kill him against his will, even though he didn't agree to it, is to miss the point. It utterly misses the point. And the last piece that we want to get to is that, because Mary says, well, if the sacrifice is done, what are we going to say about the point of the resurrection itself? He said he laid his life down and then takes it up again. What are we going to say about that? And so what I would submit, I don't have there's no proof of this. And if someone asks me, well, why did he have to do this at all? Why is it necessary that there be a sacrifice? I find that, tell me why that is. The answer is, I don't know. I don't know the mechanics of this. That's one of the places where Christians fall down, is they've got to know the mechanics. What are the rules? What was the rule that said this is the only way? When he says, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me, what you have to ask, what you have to see is, any other way for what? Obviously, something must be accomplished. And he says, if there's another way to accomplish it, it would be better than me having to be separated from you. But there clearly is not. Why does it have to be that way? I don't know. And if anybody else tells you that they do, click stop on YouTube or turn the page or whatever. They don't know. I'm sorry, we don't know. It works that way. I feel confident that it did. I trust that it is and that it was necessary, and I'm okay with that. But about the resurrection itself, if there's an atonement, and I maintain that there is a once for all atonement for us, and an atonement is where a price is paid. If there's this atonement, what good is it if people didn't know it happened? What if it had happened and he stays there and we all have to say, well, I guess it's okay. I guess this atonement was made. I guess I'm forgiven. I don't know. And so he returns. He says, I lay my life down to take it back up again. But what this is the reassurance. This is the statement that says that what I told you was true. And if this is true, then all the other things I told you are true. Without that, I suppose if we're going to get into the weird things that go on in theology, they could have said between them, well, this had to happen and it's done and you guys are okay. I'll see you when you get here. And that would have been, I guess that's it. Is that but obviously there's more than that. What we do is important. What we do here matters. And he says, you've been atoned, you've been forgiven, but this time afterwards, where he comes back and shows people that it is real, we talk for weeks about Jesus with the parables and stuff that he's instructing his disciples. He has been telling them, you're the ones that are going to take this message. He taught them and prepared them and said, you're the ones who are going to take this message to the world. I've gotten you ready. Now he comes back and he shows them, because, you think it's difficult to understand. We see that there's so much they didn't understand. And after he returns, after they see him, after they touch him, they realize, I am certain, and we're told in places that these things he's been telling them were true. That's the purpose in the resurrection. Was it necessary for the atonement? I don't know the rules. I know that the sacrifice is made, the atonement is made, it's given. But this resurrection is the part that says, okay, now you understand that everything else I've told you is true. Your job now is to go out and tell this to the other people. That was what he'd prepared them for.
I'm going to read the resurrection story now from John 20, verses 1 through 29. And then we're going to end with, we looked for a lot of Easter music, and anyhow.
We did.
We do. Well, you helped.
Okay.
Anyhow. Okay, so John 20, verse 1. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb," she said, "and we do not know where they put him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out for the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down and looked in at the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. Simon Peter arrived just after him. He entered the tomb and saw the linen cloths lying there. The cloth that had been around Jesus' head was rolled up, lying separate from the linen cloths. Then the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed, for they still did not understand from the scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes, but Mary stood outside the tomb weeping. And as she wept, she bent down to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and the other at the feet. "Woman, why are you weeping?" they asked. "Because they have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I do not know where they have put him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not recognize that it was Jesus. "Woman, why are you weeping?" Jesus asked. "Whom are you seeking?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him off, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to Mary. Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabbi," which means teacher. "Do not cling to me," Jesus said, "for I have not yet ascended to the Father, but go and tell your brothers, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and she told them what he had said to her. It was the first day of the week, and that very evening, while the disciples were together with the doors locked for the fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them. "Peace be with you," he said to them. After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Again, Jesus said to them, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so also I am sending you." When he had said this, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone his sins, they are forgiven. If you withhold forgiveness from anyone, it is withheld." Now Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he replied, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails have been and put my hand into his side, I will never believe." 8 days later, his disciples were once again inside with the doors locked, and Thomas was with them. Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then Jesus said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and look at my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas replied, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed."
And that would be us, those who have not seen and have believed. Don't start the song thing yet, but there are about a dozen things through that passage that, if we had time, I'd love to talk about. But you see a picture of them after he's been killed. And in their mind, he's been taken against his will. You see that. A lot of his words later, we're told, came back and they realized, but he's been taken against his will. He's dead. And they find themselves huddled up in a room with the door locked. Without this resurrection, they're absolutely convinced that he had a whole bunch of good sounding words, but they didn't amount to very much. And that's the purpose of the resurrection. That's what happens, is that we realize that the rest of the words were also true. There is a point, John the Baptist sends some of his people to see Jesus, and they say, "Are you the one?" John wants to know. This is John the Baptizer. John wants to know, are you the one, or should he be waiting for someone else? And instead of sending this direct answer, instead of saying, "Yep, go tell John, yes, I am," he tells them, "You go back and you tell John what you have seen." And I talk often, and I've talked over the last weeks, about the importance of a witness in Jewish law and the fact that you have to have two and all that. He sends them back and he says, don't tell them what I've said. My answer, you go back and you tell John what you've seen. That has weight. It has importance to people. Tell them what you've seen. And in this case, these people saw what they saw when they see him after they've witnessed him, or some have witnessed him die, but they know he's dead. The Romans are very thorough with that sort of thing. And they said, but he's not dead. And they went then and they told people what they had seen. We're stuck with that last part, what he said, where he says, blessed are those who have seen and believed. You want to read the exact words? I don't want to get this wrong.
Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed.
And that's us, because we've not. They were given that. That's what it took to get things started, to get them out of the locked room. We are left telling people what we've seen. If this has any value, if it has any power, if we've seen life changed, the blessings of God, we can tell people, we can read this story to them. But what has power, what has influence is when we tell people what we've seen. We read this on Easter, and it does have, it has importance to us. But we also have to look, we have to pay attention to what we have in our daily lives. Ron and Marge are online this morning. Cindy is at home and we rejoice. And they're gone. Oh, no, there you are. Hi, you're in the middle now. You were over here before. And that's all we can do is tell people what we've seen. It's how I feel when I see all of you every Sunday. By the way, last week was a disaster and we apologize, and I've gone to great lengths. Hopefully that never happens again. But this is when we look at Easter, when we look at the resurrection, when we look at this, 2 points. Remember, they didn't take him against his will. It was a sacrifice. And the resurrection is for them to be able to tell what they've seen. It was their job to go out and carry the word. We get hung up on this idea, well, he was human, and so he was afraid of this. He was not. And that's really the point. And it's the point for us when he tells us don't be afraid of these things. That's one of the things that other people look at and are able to tell what they've seen. We have seen people who live unafraid.
So Scott probably would have chosen to read the resurrection story from Luke because everybody knows that's his favorite gospel. But one of the reasons I chose John is because this song that I want to end with is from John, is using John's gospel for this song. And I will say Scott did look at a lot of music videos too, and some of them are really cheesy, you guys, is the only thing I can say. But this one, I like the song. It was written a couple of years ago. It is by, an aside, the Latter-day Saints.
You don't have to apologize. It's not one of our traditional hymns that we sing out of the hymn book, and yet we think it's
and the only thing, Jesus does have blue eyes in this video. I can't help it. But here, let me see if I can share it. Which we know is not the case. Okay, let's see. Oh.
Play down here.
Yeah. No, nothing's wrong with it, but it just probably was not what Jesus had. Okay. Give me a thumbs up, Jackie, if you can hear.
When darkness veiled the sky, the day that Jesus died, in agony upon the bitter cross, they took his body down and laid it in a tomb. His friends believed that everything was lost,
But when the third day came, the darkness turned to light. For Mary heard her name and saw the living Christ risen to set the captives free. Risen to ransom you and me, to bind up every broken heart, to conquer death and sin. Risen to bring us home again.
And in that barren place, the world forever changed. For hope was born when Jesus rose that day. And still his wounded hands reveal the love he has for every fallen soul he came to save. And he will come again, and one by one will rise to praise his holy name and see the living Christ risen to set the captives free. Risen to ransom you and me, to bind up every broken heart, to conquer death and sin. Risen to bring us home again. Alleluia, he lives. Alleluia, he is risen to set the captives free. Oh, he is risen to ransom you and me, to bind up every broken heart, to conquer death and sin. Risen to bring us home again. Risen.
Say a quick prayer. God, we are those people who have not seen and still believe, and we are blessed, and we're thankful. The things that we don't understand, we just have to trust, and we do. We see the words so often that you left behind for revealed as being for a specific purpose. They're there to tell us very specific things, and they're meaningful, and we're thankful for them, and we're thankful for all of these, and we're thankful for the gift, for the atonement, for the sacrifice that seems so impossible when we try to picture it. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Happy Easter, everybody. Next week, we're going to start a series on the book of Daniel.
And Jackie, you said something about, do you hope I've found the golden egg or whatever? And Mary interrupted me because what I was supposed to say is, oh no, I found that 22 years ago. That was, and she cut me off.
You guys have a good day.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
It almost seems like, maybe Jesus wasn't supposed to come back.
That was lovely.
Like, I have
Happy
Thank
Easter.
you.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter.
He's like, you gotta go
Bye-bye.
back and straighten them out.
It's great to see you, Ron and Marge.
It is a blessing to see y'all.
Oh, it's good to see you. So good.
Goodbye.